She commandeered the room in the basement of her dorm as soon as she realized she would have to pull an all-nighter in order to prepare for tomorrow's final. Her roommate Jenna liked to get to bed early, so she packed up everything she thought she would need and went downstairs to study. And study, and study some more. It was 2 o'clock when she realized that she'd left one of the textbooks upstairs on her bed. With a dramatic sigh, she rose and climbed the stairs slowly to her third-floor dorm room. The lights were dim in the long hallway, and the old boards creaked under her wary tread. She reached her room and turned the handle as softly as she could, pushing the door open just enough to slip inside so the hall lights wouldn't wake her roommate. The room was filled with a strange metallic smell. She frowned a bit, her arms breaking out into chills. There was a strange feeling of malice in the room, as if a malevolent gaze was fixed upon her. It was a mind trick. The all-nighter was catching up with her. She could hear Jenna breathing from the far side of the room, a heavy sound, almost as if she'd been running. Jenna must have picked up a cold during last tense week before finals. She crept along the walls until she reached her bed, groping among the covers for the stray history textbook. In the silence, she could hear a steady drip, drip, drip sound. She sighed silently. Facilities would have to come and fix the sink in the bathroom, again. Her fingers closed on the textbook. She picked it up softly and withdrew from the room as silently as she could. Relieved to be out of the room, she hurried back downstairs, collapsed into an overstuffed chair, and studied until 6 a.m. She finally decided it was enough. If she slipped upstairs now, she should get a couple hours sleep before her 9 o'clock exam. The first of the sun's rays were beaming through the windows as she slowly slid the door open, hoping not to awaken Jenna. Her nose was met by an earthy, metallic smell, a second before her eyes registered the scene in her dorm room. Jenna was spread eagle on top of her bed against the far wall. Her throat was cut from ear to ear, and her nightdress was stained with blood. 2 drops of blood fell from the saturated blanket with a drip, drip noise that sounded like a leaky faucet. Scream after scream poured from her mouth, but she couldn't stop herself any more than she could cease wringing her hands. All along the hallway, doors slammed and footsteps came running down the passage. Within moments, other students had gathered in her doorway, and one of her friends gripped her arm with a shaking hand and pointed a trembling finger towards the wall. Her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. Then she fainted into her friend's arm. On the wall above her bed, written in her roommate's blood, were the words, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" A few years ago, in a small town in Spain, there lived 2 sisters named Sarah and Jennifer. Sarah was 16 years old and Jennifer was 17. Their parents believed they had the perfect family. They lived in a large house, they owned 2 cars, they were comfortable financially, and they had 2 beautiful daughters. The parents could not have felt better about life, but they were completely unaware of a serious problem that would tear the family apart. Sarah intensely hated her sister Jennifer. The reason Sarah hated her sister was that she believed Jennifer was more beautiful than her. No matter how many times people told Sarah she was pretty, she would never believe them. When she looked in the mirror, she felt extremely ugly. When she looked at Jennifer, she saw everything she wanted to be. Jennifer had beautiful, long, blonde hair. She had an attractive, slim figure and never needed to diet. She had perfect white skin and never needed to wear makeup. But there was something Sarah envied more than anything else about her sister. It was her beautiful blue eyes. Jennifer was very popular with the boys at school. Whenever she walked by, the boys would whistle, and it seemed as if every boy in school wanted to date her. They always complimented her on her beautiful blue eyes. All of the popular girls in school wanted to hang around with Jennifer. Over time, Sarah's envy grew worse and worse. She became obsessed with her sister's eyes. One afternoon, sitting alone in her room, Sarah began brooding about her sister's good looks. As she stared at herself in the mirror, she wished that there was something she could do to destroy Jennifer. Sarah's unbridled envy had driven her over the edge of madness, and in her rage, she wanted to ruin the life of her sister. With chilling coldness, Sarah devised a crazed and depraved plan. While Sarah was brooding alone in her room, Jennifer was with her friends, hanging out at a local mall. She was blissfully unaware of what her younger sister was planning. The next evening, Sarah's parents went out to the theater together, leaving their deranged daughter alone in the house. She decided that it was the perfect opportunity to put her devious plan into action. Sarah waited until about 10 o'clock when her sister arrived home. Jennifer was in good spirits and everything seemed normal as she entered the house and walked upstairs to her bedroom. When she opened the door, she noticed something strange. The framed photograph of herself that she kept on her dressing table was lying shattered on the floor. Suddenly, she got a phone call. Looking at the screen of her iPhone, she saw it was coming from a private number. When she answered the call, she heard a voice hissing threats on the other end. The person said they wanted to rip out Jennifer's blue eyes and disembowel her. Come outside, hissed the voice. Jennifer recognized the voice. It was Sarah. Jennifer ran down the stairs and opened the front door. What she saw outside made her lose her senses. The dead body of her sister Sarah was hanging by the neck from a tree. Her stomach had been slit open and her guts were spilling out. Her dead eyes were staring straight at Jennifer. The scene was so awful that Jennifer ripped out her own eyes so that she wouldn't have to look at it anymore. Sarah's insane plan had worked. She got exactly what she wanted. In her madness, she had killed herself in the most horrible and disturbing way she could imagine in order to destroy her sister's beauty. Jennifer had lost the most beautiful thing she had, her eyes. They didn't understand him. They didn't understand art. They called him a monster and took away his cranes. They would destroy his cranes, he knew. They didn't know the significance. They couldn't see the artistry, the uniqueness of each paper. They didn't care about the stories behind them or their meaning. It was all foreign to them, so of course they had to destroy it. Uncultured thugs. That's all they were. They didn't know a damn thing about origami, or of culture, or of the world at large. They just followed their orders. They tore it all apart and spat in his face. It was killing him inside. All the time he spent practicing, refining his skills, learning the patience and insight necessary to make the perfect fold. The first time, every time. Meaningless now. Thrown in the incinerator like so much kindling. A hollow ache gripped his heart at the thought of all his work being burnt to ash. But it was the thought of losing the cranes that hurt the most. There were other pieces, of course. A pair of tortoises, a boat, several flowers, a butterfly, and 3 koi fish. But the cranes were the pride of his collection. The cranes were the whole reason he'd learned how to fold in the first place. He'd only made 15 of the 1,000 he needed to complete the set. But they dominated the studio, all strung up along the ceiling in well-ordered row. He loved the way the light had danced along their silver and gold embellishments as they kept silent watch over him and his ongoing projects below. the collective embodiment of peace as they were always meant to be. He'd been forced to watch them take each crane down, helpless and restrained, crying the hot, silent tears of an impotent rage. At least they'd been gentle in removing them. He had that small comfort, at least. But he knew they were all bound for the incinerators. He'd hear them talking about it. Spare the families, they'd say, throwing dirty looks his way, draping coarse white sheets over his fragile cranes and carting them away to be burned. To where they wouldn't say. Oh, that they wouldn't say. They said all sorts of things about his mind, about his depravity, and how he didn't even deserve the scant rights and protections domestic animals had recently been granted. But they wouldn't say a word about where they would burn his beauties. Thugs, the lot of them. They were true monsters. They were destroying true art. If he'd just been allowed to finish his work, there's so much he could have given to the world. Because if the gods were willing to grant a single wish for 1,000 cranes made of paper, what might they have been willing to grant him for 1,000 cranes made of flesh and bone? Tick-tock, time goes by. Tick-tock, close your eyes. Now, sister dear, you've made a mess. What's that you say? It's on my dress. Your dress was white, and now it's red. It's not my fault. They bled and bled. Well, sister dear, that's half the fun. And now our night has just begun. We'll tie their hands and sew their lips. We'll poke and slice their fingertips. Take out their eyes and hear them scream. Against their throats our knives will gleam. I hear them crying from the hall. No one will ever hear their call. They have no hope, and that's the fun, until we kill them one by one. But sister, wait, we mustn't rush. We wouldn't want their veins to gush. We want to play with them much longer. We'll keep them fed to make them stronger. Feed them bones, hair, and nails. We'll harvest from them all in pails. We'll save it up and make a stew. I guess for now, they'll make it through. Now, sister dear, it's worth the wait to see the anguish on their face, to see them gag through sewn-up faces, to bind them up with ties and laces, to cut their limbs off one by one. To hear their screams is so much fun. To hear them cry for all their friends, to hear them beg for life to end, to hear them mumble to themselves, to keep their organs on the shelves, to mock them all in their despair, to rip out pieces of their hair, to dip their wounds in burning bleach, to keep salvation out of reach. I'll cut their eyelids off and laugh. I'll give each one an acid bath. Rip off their fingernails and grin, then stab their eyeballs with a pin. Cut them up and watch them suffer. What are we waiting for, dear brother? We haven't got any time to waste. Now to the cellar with much haste. Aw, look here, brother, this one's dead. We'll cut her up and save the head. We'll use her parts for stew we're making. We'll use her blood for all our baking. We'll feed her eyeballs to her friend. We'll feed her brother bits of skin. We'll cut it special, just for him. We'll let him know it's from his sister. Then we'll ask how much he missed her. We'll watch him try to force some tears and watch him squirm in pain. He's been down here for many years, so tears are all in vain. At last, dear sister, the time has come. At last, the sun has set. It's time to get our harvest done. It's time to greet our guests. I hear them knocking at the door. I hear the laughs again. Time to let them in once more and let our game begin. I'm running as fast as I can down the road ahead of me. It's a long gravel road. As far as the eye can see, there is no end. I'm in heels. I've tripped and stumbled and nearly fallen countless times. But I can't risk stopping long enough to take them off. I can hear them behind me, chasing me. There are 3 of them. They are tall and fast, and they're each wearing the same black robes and mask. I don't know why they're chasing me, and I don't remember how it all started. All I can remember is running. Suddenly I see another one, and he is coming towards me from the opposite direction. I begin to panic. I consider dashing into the trees on either side of the road, but surely I'd twist my ankle and be doomed. No, I must keep running. I must stay on this road and hope for the best. My heart thrashes wildly in my chest as I reach the figure, but he continues past me. A moment later I hear screaming behind me, and I can't help but to turn and look. He's attacked them. All 3 of my pursuers are laying motionlessly on the ground, presumably dead. I see no weapon, so I'm clueless as to how he's done it. I have stopped running now, and I stare wide-eyed as the figure approaches me. "Thank you," I stammer nervously. The figure's breaths come loud and raspy through the hole at the mouth of their mask. We both stand for what seems like an eternity before they finally respond. "You wouldn't be thanking me if you knew what I look like." I'm surprised at the voice. It's female. I watch curiously and more than a little scared as the figure raises her hand up to take her mask and slowly remove it. I scream, "This person has my face!" Only it's beaten and mangled. She has 2 black eyes, a bloody broken nose, and a busted up lip. "What's going on here?" I cry. She stares blankly at me. "I couldn't let them do what they've done to the rest," she said. "It's time for you to return now." I open my mouth to demand a real answer, but then I start to feel very tired. I try to fight it, but I can't. I fall to the ground. I'm in a hospital bed when I wake up. I moan in pain because my head feels like it's splitting open, and my parents rush to my side. I hadn't noticed them. "Sweetie, are you okay?" my mother asks, taking my hand in hers and kissing me on the cheek. I shut my eyes and try to remember what happened. I'd been watching the news. There was an interesting story going that people were mysteriously dying in their sleep. Not unusual for the elderly, but these people were my age. Autopsies repeatedly revealed that the victims were perfectly healthy. I must have fallen asleep, but that dream, it felt so real, so eerie. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine," I answer. "What happened?" My mother looks at my father as to ask him if he wants to take over. He shakes his head. "No one really knows, dear," she tells me. "You weren't answering my calls, so I got worried. I rushed over and used the spare key above the door to let myself in. I found you unconscious on your couch. You were holding this." She reaches into her purse and pulls out a mask. The mask from my dream.